This is a presentation on BUMED Instruction 6440.5 Delta, Navy Medicine's Augmentation Program. Real quick breakdown of the SSIC code. We're in the 6000 series for medicine, and then the 6400 series that makes us special fields. So if we think about what this instruction is about, it's all about getting BSO 18 personnel, people working at all the hospitals, working under Navy medicine, getting them ready to execute Navy Expeditionary Health Service support missions, how we pull them out of these hospitals in order to support things like Marine Corps forces or hospital ships or casualty receiving ships. Before we talk about the various responsibilities laid out in this instruction, it might help to have an understanding of all the various echelons that help organize the Navy. So let's talk about Echelon 1, 2, 3, and 4. Echelon 1 at the very top, that's the Office of the CNO, right? So that's OPNAV. Examples of Echelon 2 commands would be something like BUMED, the Bureau of Medicine and Surgery, or BUPERS, the Bureau of Navy Personnel, or the Pacific Fleet, or the U.S. Fleet Forces. These are all examples of Echelon 2 commands. So since most of what we deal with, our world is Navy medicine, I'll break down BUMED's Echelon 3s. So the Echelon 3s that report to BUMED, that's going to be the regional commands. That's going to be Navy Medicine West, and that's going to be Navy Medicine East, as well as in MEDLC, Navy Medicine Education, Training, and Logistics Command. And then if we wanted to look at some examples of some Echelon 4s, if we were staying in Navy Medicine West, we might see something like Naval Medical Center San Diego, or Naval Hospital 29 Palms, Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton, or Naval Hospital Birmingham. Those would all be examples of Echelon 4 commands. So in this instruction, we're going to talk a lot about the responsibilities of Echelon 3, right? And Echelon 3 would be regional commands like Navy Medicine West and Navy Medicine East. And when they're sourcing commands that they'll reach out to grab augmentees, to grab personnel to go on these deployments, are usually the Echelon 4s, right? That's personnel that are stationed at Balboa, Navy Medical Center San Diego, or 29 Palms, or Camp Pendleton, or Naval Hospital Birmingham. A quick overview of how augmentation works before we start getting into the details of this instruction. So either a Marine Command or Navy Command is going to submit a request for support or a request for forces. That's got to be sent to OPNAV, okay? It's got to be validated by OPNAV before it gets sent down to BUMED, right? So then OPNAV will validate it and they'll send it down to BUMED in a specific shop within BUMED, M9, which we'll talk about when we get a little bit more into the details. Once they've received it, they're going to send it to the appropriate Echelon 3. So they're going to send it down, and remember the Echelon 3s, those are the regional commands. So they're going to send it down either the Navy Medicine West or Navy Medicine East. So the Echelon 3, the regional command, they're going to send it down to one of their sourcing commands, to one of the hospitals more than likely that works for them. The sourcing command is going to fill that need. They're going to give up that body to go, fill that request for support or that request for forces, and that person's going to end up getting deployed with that unit. A lot of BUMED responsibilities are discussed in this instruction, so it'd be helpful to kind of understand some of the organizational structure of BUMED that's relevant to this instruction. So starting from the top, we've got Chief BUMED, right? We've got the Surgeon General. We're going to say the Surgeon General directs, coordinates, and monitors the readiness and execution of Navy Expeditionary Health Service support platforms, individual augmentee, and emergent mission support programs, and provides a ready medical force in support of the Navy Marine Corps Joint and Coalition operational forces. They're going to provide input to higher authorities regarding individual and platform augmentation fill rates, assignment details, and readiness status, and they're going to provide recommendations for nomination for designated platform leadership positions. Some of the departments within BUMED we've got to be familiar with. We've got the Deputy Chief BUMED for Total Force, Business Operations, and for Readiness and Health. And then we've got divisions within this, okay? So for Total Force, the two shops we've got to know about M1 and M7. M1, our Deputy Director for Military Manpower and Personnel. M7, your Deputy Director for Education and Training. For our Deputy Chief BUMED of Business Operations, we've got M4 and we've got M8. M4, your Deputy Director for Fleet Support and Logistics. M8, your Financial Management and Comptroller. And then for our Readiness and Health, we've probably got the most important one that's mentioned in this instruction, anyway, by the way, our M9, our Deputy Director for Operational Medicine and Capabilities. Let's talk about the responsibilities of our M1, the Deputy Director for Military Manpower and Personnel. So our M1 is going to ensure medical billets are properly aligned in the Total Force Manpower Management System and the Defense Medical Human Resource System Internet, or our DMRSI. And we're going to say that these two systems are the Navy's designated official manpower data systems. Okay, our M1's got to make sure that our billets are accurately reflected in these two systems. Our M1 is going to maintain the Expeditionary Medicine Platform Readiness and Training System, MPARTS, and we're going to say MPARTS is Navy Medicine's official readiness tracking system. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about MPARTS later on in this presentation. And then M1 is also responsible for mapping authorized peacetime billets to operational platforms. So, and we'll talk about a little bit more how this works when we get into this, but the M1 is responsible to make sure that the people that are assigned to our BSO 18s, or people assigned to Navy Medicine commands, that they have an additional billet assigned to them that maps them, that augments them out to these operational platforms if they're ever needed. If we ever have to, spin up and go on a deployment or take the Mercy or the Comfort out or something like that, that we've got those billets filled. The M7, Deputy Director of Education and Training. So overall educational requirements that are needed for people to get augmented and go on these operational deployments. So they're going to establish policy to ensure individual and platform training programs are complied with and sufficiently meet operational readiness requirements. They're going to advocate the fulfillment of medical training requirements for individual and platform augments, and they're going to translate the requirements for individual and platform augmentation personnel to participate in realistic training and joint combined exercises. Our M4, Deputy Director of Fleet Support and Logistics, right? So everything logistical, everything supply and equipment and logistics. So they're going to ensure that Navy Medicine logistic readiness elements are ready to execute requirements of respective platform required operational capabilities and projected operational environments. So they're going to make sure that, we have the logistical elements, the things we need to make sure that we can fulfill the capacity we're supposed to fulfill. So that expeditionary medical facility brings to the table everything it's supposed to bring to the table, and that it can work in the operation we project it to work in. And it's going to provide centralized planning and control of all resources necessary to design, procure, and maintain deployable expeditionary medical facility platforms. And it's going to coordinate as appropriate with the combatant commander requests for Navy deployable medical systems or specific medical material support. And they're going to coordinate as appropriate with other DoD activities for Navy medicine material and logistics. Okay, so M4, right, logistics. They're going to, they're there to make sure that our logistics works, that our equipment and our supplies meets the standards that it's supposed to meet, that we can bring to the table the capabilities we're supposed to be bringing to the combatant commanders and to other DoD activities when we're working in that joint environment. Deputy Director for Financial Management and Comptroller, our M8. Right, so everything finances, right? So they're going to plan programs and budgets for Navy Medicine augmentee personnel requirements for which BSO 18 is financially responsible. So we'll see later on in this instruction, right? It takes money to deploy people on these augmentation as an augmentee. Some of the costs are covered by the BSO 18 or the sourcing command, the hospital that they're coming from. Some of it by the combatant command. Our M8, they're going to budget and make programs to kind of hash out what the BSO 18 is financially responsible for. And they're also going to develop and oversee a cost accounting structure to track costs for our Navy Medicine augmentee personnel missions. Right, our M9, Deputy Director for Operational Medicine and Capabilities. And like I was saying earlier, probably the most important one in this instruction when it comes to BUMED, the most important department to be familiar with and has the biggest responsibilities when it comes to the augmentation program within BUMED. So our M9, Deputy Director for Operational Medicine and Capabilities, is going to execute validated missions, mobilizations, and augmentation requirements received via official naval message system. So remember, our Echelon 1, OpNav, right, is going to validate these missions as they come in. They're going to send it to BUMED, and it's actually our M9, our Operational Medicine and Capabilities. They're going to be the ones that task it out to the appropriate Echelon 3. They're going to be the ones that task it out to that Navy Medicine region. So task Navy Medicine Echelon 3 activities for deployment execution of individual and platform augments via official naval message, and they're also going to provide assessments of personnel, training, and logistics readiness and readiness reporting for current platforms of record and impacts on on BSO 18 healthcare operations on a quarterly basis. Okay, so on a quarterly basis, they got to do assessments on personnel training and logistics for the platforms, and they also have to look at the impact this is having, right? So if we're augmenting all these people out to go on these missions with the Marine Corps forces, if we're sending them out on hospital ships or casualty receiving ships or expeditionary medical facilities, we got to look at the impact this is having on our BSO 18s, the impact it's having on our hospitals. Okay, is it having an impact on our ability to our healthcare operations here within the hospitals? Responsibilities of our Echelon 3s when it comes to augmentation, right? So remember our Echelon 3s, these are like our regional commands, Navy Medicine West, Navy Medicine East, and even in Metal Sea, but they're mostly training and logistics. So the responsibilities are going to be things like they're responsible for ensuring that source of commands provide ready medical personnel through meeting readiness training requirements. So they're responsible for making sure all the commands underneath them, right, all their Echelon 4s, all the naval hospitals underneath them, right, that they have ready medical personnel that meet the readiness training requirements to be augmented on these deployments. They're going to provide technical guidance and administrative support to source and commands within their area of responsibility, right? So they got to provide guidance for all the commands that fall underneath them. They're going to conduct assist visits every 2 years or as requested to their source and commands to ensure compliance with this instruction. So every 2 years they got to go down to all their various hospitals and do assist visits. When tasked by BUMED, right? They're going to task their source and commands to provide qualified personnel within their NavMed Echelon 3 activities area of responsibility. So for instance, if Navy Medicine West, the Echelon 3 is tasked by BUMED, right? Remember, and it would be BUMED M9, right? M9 tasks Navy Medicine West with a augmentation mission, right? They're going to go down to their source and commands. They'd either go to Navy Medical Center San Diego or 29 Palms or Camp Pendleton or one of the hospitals that works underneath them, and they're going to make sure that task gets fulfilled. They're going to monitor, right, the ability of their source and commands to meet these platform augmentation requirements and the training and readiness status using MPARTs. So they're going to monitor MPARTs, and they're going to provide analysis on readiness status to BUMED leadership as needed. And so they're going to always be able to report on, the information on MPARTs up into BUMED, right? And then they're going to conduct quarterly data analysis for personal deficiencies, threshold of compromised beneficiary services, deployment trends, and the readiness of the Navy Medicine Forces obligated to platforms. Okay, so every quarter they're going to look and see what kind of deficiencies they have for their augmentees, right? See how their hospitals are doing. Are they starting to compromise their services by supporting these augmentations? What the deployment trends have been like, and then the readiness for Navy Medicine Forces that are obligated to the platforms. Your source and commands, right? Your COs and OICs of your BSO 18 source and commands, like your naval hospitals, okay? Your COs and your OICs of them. They're responsible for providing a ready medical personnel in support of a full range of military operations. They're responsible for the overall readiness of their activities, right? They ensure that their service members maintain a high state of personal, physical, and professional readiness capable of rapid worldwide deployment. They ensure individuals are accurately reported in MPARTs. They support platform training within their source and command in order to ensure personnel assigned to platforms are trained per the platform's requirements, right? So they're going to have personnel assigned to them that are, also could potentially be augmented to Marine Corps forces or casualty receiving ships or hospital ships, and they got to make sure they're supporting their training requirements. They're going to maintain operational control of personnel until they've reported to their gaining operational command or their combatant command. So if one of their personnel gets augmented to a different, to Marine Corps forces, they still maintain operational control until that person's checked in. They maintain administrative control of personnel throughout the deployment. This includes things like their evaluations, advancement, officer fitness reports, and promotion requirements. They're going to appoint in writing a POMI, right? They're going to appoint in writing their plans, operations, and medical intelligence officer, who's going to do the day-to-day responsibilities of this instruction as it pertains to the source and command. And they're also going to appoint in writing an OSO, your operational support officer, who's going to support the command POMI, right? So your POMI, we're going to see, is, at least on that local level and that hospital level, has a lot of the responsibilities as it pertains to augmentation. Okay, so they're going to be the one that ensures that personnel are trained, right, for their mission platform requirements. They're going to be the one that actually utilizes MPARTs and inputs data into MPARTs, and they're going to be the ones that do quarterly data analysis for deficiencies, deployment trends, the readiness of their forces that are obligated to these platforms, and they, at that local level, are going to see how it affects the hospital as well, how it affects that BSO 18 command. Your OSO, right? Your OSO can assume the command POMI responsibilities if need be, and they can advise and support the CO and the OIC. Right, and then your staff education and training, department within the BSO 18, they got to make sure that they can train the personnel, right? That they can maintain the readiness as it comes to training for the personnel assigned to these platforms. And then as a BSO 18 personnel, you got responsibilities. Okay, so you're responsible for maintaining your deployment readiness. Okay, and you need to report to your POMI immediately if anything affects your deployment readiness, and you got to get that reported to the POMI within 48 hours. Okay, if there's any change in your deployability, you're supposed to report that to your POMI within 48 hours, and then you're supposed to execute the individual platform training requirements as directed by the POMI and your education and training department. Moving on to readiness, and more specifically readiness reporting. So first thing we're going to talk about when it comes to readiness reporting is the Defense Readiness Reporting System TAC-N Navy, right? The Defense Readiness Reporting System Navy. So this right here is the authoritative system to meet the DoD's requirement to report readiness, right? We've got to report readiness of the Navy to the DoD, and all the branches of the armed forces got to report, for the DoD, their readiness. Okay, so it reports and displays the status or availability of personnel, equipment, supply, training, ordnance, and facilities, which we can use the acronym PESTOF. Okay, for personnel, equipment, supply, training, ordnance, and facilities. All right, so this is going to meet the DoD's requirement to report our readiness. We've got to get all our information into DRRS TAC-N, the Defense Readiness Reporting System TAC Navy. To get there, we've got a couple of systems. Okay, the first and foremost we're going to talk about is MPARTS, and we've already kind of briefly talked about MPARTS in the beginning of this lecture, but MPARTS is the Navy Medicine's, right? Navy Medicine's designated official readiness tracking and reporting system. With MPARTS, we've got a couple of statuses we can look at. We can look at your A status, or your percentage of administrative items completed to be ready to go. Your P status, right? The percentage of operational billets filled in MPARTS. The T status, which is your training status, and your R status, which is the overall readiness status. MPARTS is fed by a couple of systems we touched on briefly. It's fed into by your Total Force Manpower Management System and Demmer's Eye. That's going to plug some information into MPARTS, but MPARTS is Navy Medicine's designated official readiness tracking and reporting system. That's what Navy Medicine's going to use to capture all the readiness stuff for people assigned to these medical augmentation platforms. Okay, we're going to use MPARTS. Another system we should talk briefly about is JMAR, the Joint Medical Asset Repository System, and this is a system that keeps track of all the medical logistics and equipment and stuff like that. Because remember, when we get to our defense reporting readiness system, part of that is, PESTOF is facilities and equipment. So MPARTS and JMAR, they won't talk directly to the Defense Readiness Reporting System. So we need something to bridge that gap, and what that system is that's going to bridge that gap is the RCRP, the Readiness and Cost Reporting Program. So we say the Readiness Cost Reporting Program is being developed to serve as a bridge to bring the authoritative data to the disparate DoD and Navy data sources that are not authorized to interface with DRRS TAC-N. So that's going to pull the information from MPARTS, as far as readiness goes, for all our BSO 18 personnel, and it's going to pull all the logistical information from JMAR, and it's going to be able to interface to feed it into what the DoD wants, the system we got to use for the DoD, which is our Defense Readiness Reporting System TAC Navy. So the individual, when it comes to readiness, like I said, a lot of times when you're assigned to a BSO 18 platform, right, you're holding a specific billet, but you also can potentially be augmented, and that'll be known within your orders. That'll be known when you check in that you could potentially be augmented to a specific platform. So the minimum requirements for your platform to be ready to deploy on your platform, those minimum requirements are listed on a form called the NAVMED 6440/1. Follows the same SSIC code as this instruction. Okay, 6440/1. Right, that's our individual deployment readiness checklist. Individuals shall report to the command POMI upon identification of delinquent items or change in status for all items on the NAVMED 6440/1. All right, so this has to be done within 30 days of checking in. When a member checks in to, a BSO 18 activity, and they also potentially could be augmented, they have what we call an associated billet. They've got to get this done within 30 days, and then if anything changes on this, they've got to let the POMI know immediately, but at least within 48 hours, okay? So within 2 days, or as soon as possible, okay? 6440-1, your individual deployment readiness checklist, got to get that done within 30 days of checking into command. Got to let the POMI know if anything changes on this. Right, so people that are in a non-deployability status. So if a member that's assigned to a platform, right, a member who checks into a hospital and also can potentially be augmented to a platform, if they receive temporary additional duty orders, or if they're in a temporary non-deployable status, the Echelon 3 activity in coordinating with the source and command POMI must ensure that that platform billet vacancy can be filled, okay? So if you're going to be non-deployable, and we'll talk about some TAD, some temporary additional duty stuff later on, but if that's going to be vacant for a minute, the POMI and the region, right, the Echelon 3 are responsible to make sure that that vacancy is filled with a qualified individual, right? If persons are determined to have a temporary condition that renders them non-deployable for greater than 90 days, they can no longer remain assigned to that platform. So if you like I said, if you're working one of these sourcing commands and you go on LIMDU and it's going to be longer than 90 days, you can no longer be assigned to that platform. We've got to get somebody else. If an individual is determined to have a permanent condition, then of course they can't remain assigned to that platform as well, and they'll be replaced by another qualified individual. Right? The source and command POMI has to ensure that there's an accurate depiction of the command and the individual's current state of readiness by updating an individual's information and imparts within 2 business days of notification. So if you go on LIMDU, right, you yourself have 48 hours to let the POMI know, and then the POMI's only got 2 days to make sure that it's updated and imparts. Okay, so what instruction is Navy Medicine's Augmentation Program? What instruction is the Navy Medicine's Augmentation Program? That's BUMED Instruction 6440.5 Delta. What is Navy Medicine's designated official readiness tracking and reporting system? Navy Medicine's designated and official readiness tracking and reporting system, that is imparts. What system does the Navy utilize as an authoritative system to meet the DoD's requirement to report readiness? All right, to meet the DoD's requirement, we're going to use the Defense Readiness and Reporting System, or TAC Navy, which is DRRS TAC N. What form is the Individual Deployment Readiness Checklist? What form is the Individual Deployment Readiness Checklist? That is a NAVMED Form 6440-1. Within how many days of checking in must a member assigned to a platform complete their NAVMED 6440-1? They've got 30 days to get that done. If a member has a change that affects their deployment readiness, how quickly must they notify the POMI? They got to let the POMI know within 48 hours. How quickly must a POMI update a member's status in imparts if there's a change to their readiness? They've got to do that within 2 days. If a member has a condition that'll make them non-deployable for blank days, they will no longer be assigned to that platform. If you're going to be non-deployable for 90 days, you can no longer be assigned to that platform. What is the Navy's designated official manpower data systems? What's the Navy's designated official manpower data systems? Well, that's your Total Force Manpower Management System and Dimmer's Eye. All right, moving on with some more manning. So personnel assigned to source and commands, right, are ordered to a billet with a specific billet identification number. So if you get stationed at Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton, you've got a specific billet number for that. But a lot of times that billet identification number has an associated platform assigned, okay? So you'll also have an associated billet identification number that maps you, that can potentially make you be augmented to support a different platform. The intent of the associated billet identification number is to identify requirements for wartime contingency platforms in order to establish and facilitate optimum platform readiness. Personnel can only be assigned to one associated billet identification number at a time. And when it comes to augmenting BSO 18 platforms, we're going to follow the specific proceedings, the specific order. Okay, so the order it goes in is our Marine Corps forces, our MAR forces, right? Our casualty receiving treatment ships, our hospital ships, our expeditionary medical facilities, our forward deployed preventative medicine units, our OCONUS, right, our overseas MTFs, and our blood processing units, right? This is the precedence we go in when it comes to augmenting platforms, right? Marine Corps forces, casualty receiving ships, hospital ships, expeditionary, our EMF, our expeditionary medical facilities, our forward deployed preventative medicine units, our OCONUS MTFs, and our blood processing units. Next, we're going to discuss some administrative requirements when it comes to temporary additional duty. When you get sent on temporary additional duty away from your command, okay? So if somebody goes on temporary additional duty, we've got some reporting requirements depending on what that additional duty is, right? So Navy Medicine Echelon 3 activities, they've got to be notified, right? The regional commands got to be notified for all temporary additional duty that is greater than 30 days, okay? If you get sent away from your command and you're assigned to a platform and you get sent away from your command for greater than 30 days on temporary additional duty, we've got to let the Echelon 3 know about that, okay? And then we got to let them know no later than 30 days prior to you starting that temporary additional duty, okay? So Echelon 3 needs to know if you're going on temporary additional duty for greater than 30 days, and we got to let them know 30 days before you go on that temporary additional duty. They also need to know if you're going on temporary additional duty overseas, okay? No matter what the time frame is. So any temporary additional duty overseas, we also got to let the Echelon 3 know, and the same rules. We got to let them know no later than 30 days prior to you going on that temporary additional duty. All right, our sourcing command POMI when it comes to manpower, our plans, operations, and medical intelligence officer. All right, so they got to ensure that deployable personnel readiness record is updated, right, and that it's maintained accurately and entered into MPART. So got to make sure that your readiness record is good to go, and they're responsible for making sure that it's entered into MPARTs. They got to ensure that all platform augmentee personnel within their command with associated billet identification number, that the associated billet identification assignment information is updated in order to maintain the readiness status of the platform. They've got to validate deployable status upon the member's completion of the NAVMED 6440/1. So when you finish that deployment, deployment checklist, they've got to make sure that it's actually valid, that it's complete, and that it accurately reflects, your current status. If an individual is determined to be in a non-deployable status, they're supposed to work with that individual to resolve any outstanding issues. And then they're going to distribute the sourcing command letter of platform assignment and associated guidance upon check-in of a platform assigned individual. So when you check in, they're supposed to give you the letter of platform assignment saying, hey, you're assigned to this platform. These are your training requirements for the specific platform, right? And then any other guidance you might need for that platform. All right, so the individual member has to complete their NAVMED 6440/1 within 30 working days upon checking in, and they got to maintain those requirements continually thereafter, okay? And that letter of platform assignment will detail required platform-specific screenings that might be needed in addition. They got to report to the POMI immediately upon identification of changes of events that affect their deployment readiness status within 48 hours of knowledge of a change in condition. They've got to execute individual and platform training requirements as directed by the sourcing command POMI and the staff education and training department. You got to go to your training for that platform. You got to go to your platform specific training. Okay, what is a precedence in which platforms will be augmented? What is a precedence in which platforms will be augmented? We're going to start with our Marine Corps forces, then we're going to go to our casualty receiving ships, then our hospital ships, after that our EMF, then our forward deployed preventative medicine units, then our OCONUS MTFs, and lastly our blood processing units. Temporary additional duty greater than how many days for personnel assigned to platforms requiring notifications in NAVMED Echelon 3 activities? Well, if you're going to go on temporary additional duty for greater than 30 days, right, we got to let Echelon 3 know. We got to let our Echelon 3 know, and we also got to let the Echelon 3 know if we're going overseas for temporary additional duty. And platform assigned personnel who are going temporary additional duty for greater than 30 days overseas, are going overseas, when must we let the Echelon 3 know? Well, we got to let the Echelon 3 know no later than 30 days prior to going on that temporary additional duty. One instruction is our Navy Medicine Augmentation Program. Our Navy Medicine Augmentation instruction is BUMED 6440.5. What is Navy Medicine's designated official readiness tracking and reporting system? Well, that is MPARTS. What system does the Navy utilize as the authoritative system to meet the DoD's requirement to report readiness? Well, that's our DRRS TAC-N, our Defense Reporting Readiness System Navy. What forms your individual deployment readiness checklist? That's NAVMED 6440/1. Within how many days of checking in must a member assigned to a platform complete their NAVMED 6440/1? They got 30 days to get that done. Right. If a member has a change that affects their deployment readiness, how quickly must they notify the POMI? They got to let the POMI know within 2 days or 48 hours. And then how quickly must the POMI update a member's status and imparts? If there is a change in their readiness, the POMI's got 2 days to get that done. If a member has a condition that'll make them non-deployable for blank days, they will no longer be assigned to a platform. If you've got a condition that'll make you non-deployable for 90 days, can't be assigned to that platform anymore. What's the Navy's designated official manpower data system? The Navy's official manpower data systems is going to be TIFMS and DEMERS-I, right? A Total Force Manpower Management System and DEMERS-I. All right, let's talk about tasking now. We've got two types of taskings we're going to discuss. We've got a request for forces and a request for support. Our request for forces originates from a naval component commander through the joint staff for capabilities and support of combatant command requirements. It supports deployments, operations, or exercises. Our request for support are Navy to Navy requests, right, from a Navy component for capabilities and support of Navy requirements. And again, it supports, right, deployments, operations, and exercises, but these are usually short duration exercises, usually under 30 days for requests for support, or request for forces is usually a little bit longer. All right, so taskings, right? Taskings that have not been validated by OPNAV prior to being received by BUMED will not be tasked to Echelon 3s. So somebody requesting forces, right? A Marine Corps unit, a Navy unit, or even in the joint environment. If they want an individual augmentee, or if we need a platform assigned personnel, it's got to be validated by OPNAV. Remember, OPNAV are Echelon 1. When OPNAV validates it, they're going to send it down to BUMED or Echelon 2, right? And BUMED will then send it on to the regional command when they'll reach out to their sourcing commands, right? Our regional commands are Echelon 3s, right? But it's got to be validated by OPNAV first. All right, so upon receipt of the validated tasking requirement, BUMED M9, so specifically within BUMED M9, right, our operational medicine and capabilities development, right, they're going to determine the due date that'll make sure that the Echelon 3 has as much time as feasible to officially task their Echelon 3 activities via official naval message, okay? So BUMED M9 will receive it, right? And they're going to pick a due date, and they're going to task it down to the Echelon 3s, and which is either going to be Navy Medicine West or Navy Medicine East, right? And they're going to do that via official message, and then the Echelon 3 is going to reach down to their sourcing commands and try to man this thing. All right, so BUMED M9 will task the appropriate NAVMED Echelon 3 activity via official naval message as soon as possible, but no later than 2 working days after receiving the official notification from OPNAV. Once the BUMED M9 has identified which Echelon 3 activity will be tasked with the mission, it will create a mission number and imparts. And then the Echelon 3 must submit all requests for extensions no later than 3 business days prior to the due date set forth in the original tasking. So when the Echelon 3 receives, right, the mission from BUMED M9, if they need an extension, they've got to get that extension in no later than 3 business days prior to the due date of that original tasking. Right, so the vetting process, all right? So the vetting process, and in a later slide, we'll get a little bit more detail in this, how this works, but when we go to vet who we're going to send on this, we've got an order we got to go in when we look at alternates, okay? So we can, first things first, we're going to do a waiver, see if we can get away with the waiver. If somebody doesn't quite meet all the requirements, and if we can't get a waiver approved, then we're going to look into substitution, and if substitution is not going to work, we're going to have to kick it back up, okay? We're going to have to do a reclamation. All right, so first, before we kind of get into this vetting process, let's talk about PRDs, okay? So if somebody gets, potentially tapped to be augmented onto a platform, we got one of the first things we got to look at is a projected rotation date. Okay, so official approval for an extension from Naval Personnel Command must be submitted 10 days prior to the nomination deadline, but no later than 90 days prior to the mission. So if somebody's PRD is not going to meet the mission requirements, if they're willing, we got to see if they'll extend their PRD on station, right? And it's got to be submitted 10 days prior to the nomination deadline. So 10 days prior to the deadline where we've got to submit that name up to BUMED, right? And no later than 90 days prior to the mission actually taking off, okay? So 10 days prior to the nomination deadline, no later than 90 days prior to the mission. If a member is unwilling to extend their PRD, right, or approval from Naval Personnel Command is not obtained 90 days prior to the mission, well, we got to do some things, okay? The NAVMED Echelon 3 may request for inbound permanent replacement to arrive early, right? So this person, you know, their PRD doesn't meet it. There should be somebody inbound with the same platform. The Echelon 3 can request to see if that inbound person can come early and they can fulfill that requirement. NAVMED Echelon 3 activities should utilize a substitution policy if that doesn't work, okay? So if we can't get a replacement to arrive early, we're going to look into the substitution policy, which we'll talk about in the slides to come. So waiver types, right? So first thing first, if we do have somebody whose PRD is good, but they don't meet all the requirements, we'll try to submit a waiver to see if we can get by, okay? So the waiver types that can be submitted, all right, we can do rank and pay grade, we can do medical waivers, we can do specialty or skill set. So if they don't quite have the specific NEC or the specific skill set that they're asking for, we'll see if we can get by with the waiver, if it's still close enough. Utilization. And then our waivers, they got to be submitted to BUMED M9, right? But final adjudication is going to be done by the combatant command, okay? So any waivers for rank, for medical issues, for specialty skill set or utilization, they got to be submitted to BUMED M9, right? They got to be submitted to operational medicine and capabilities up in BUMED, but the final adjudication is going to happen with the combatant command. Substitutions, so justifications for substitutions, right? The person's not physically qualified and the waiver didn't go through, right? Unable to maintain security clearance for the mission, so they can't be utilized. Member is separating prior to mission completion. Emergency leave situation. An emergent IA mission arises that takes precedence, so another mission took the person off of our hands, or circumstances causing extraordinary hardship to the member, and these will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. So the substitution policy, right? So we're going to try to fill, if we can't get the person, right, none of our waivers go through, we're going to start this substitution policy. First things first, we're going to try to fill the requirement utilizing a qualified person assigned to the same platform. Okay, assigned to the exact same platform, that's what we're going to do. If we can't do that, if we don't have a person capable of doing that, right, if no qualified person can be found, then the Echelon 3 activities got to be notified, right? We got to notify BUMED M9 and try to fill the requirement using a qualified person assigned to the same platform type. Okay, so the same platform type, but not the same specific platform. If we can't find that, right? If we can't do that, we're going to fill the requirement utilizing a qualified unassigned person within that Echelon 3, within that region, okay? So first things first, same platform, we'll try to find somebody on the same platform. If not, somebody with the same platform type, and if not, somebody who's not even assigned as an augment, right, to that platform, but is at least qualified. And if we can't do that, right, if these steps have been exhausted, then the Echelon 3 activity, the region, is going to submit a reclama, right, a reclamation of the M9 up to BUMED M9 saying, hey, we can't fill this within our region. All right, then BUMED M9 will task a second, right? So if we tried that throughout Navy Medicine West and we couldn't find anybody for the specific platform all throughout Navy Medicine West, now BUMED is going to reach down to another Echelon 3, which would be Navy Medicine East, to see if they can fill the requirement there. Okay, if no qualified person can be identified in any of the Navy Medicine Echelon 3 activities, then BUMED M9 will determine if the person can be sourced from another platform type. Right. And then if BSO 18 cannot source the requirements, BUMED M9 will submit a reclama on behalf of BSO 18 to the requester. Okay, let's see if we can diagram this thing out. So There's a request for support or request for forces sent by a Marine or a Navy command or a Joint Service Command, right? So that request for support or request for forces is going to be sent to OpNav, right? It's going to be sent to the Echelon 1, and OpNav's going to validate that mission. Once they've validated it, they're going to go ahead and kick it down to BUMED, more specifically BUMED M9, right? The Operational Medicine and Capabilities Development Shop, right? BUMED M9 is going to kick it down to the NAVMED Echelon 3, right? Within 2 working days after receiving it from OpNav via naval message. They're also going to create a mission number in MParts. The Echelon 3 is going to go ahead and kick it down to their sourcing commands to try to get it filled, to get it manned, right? And if the sourcing command has somebody tapped but who might not be qualified, they'll look at the waiver process, and we can try to waive, right? Rank and pay grade, medical, specialty, and utilization. If we can't get it waived, right, we can't get the person qualified, we'll look at the substitution, right? And the substitution is going to go where you're trying to substitute somebody on the same platform. If we don't have a person on the same platform type, and if we don't have somebody on the same platform type, we'll look at getting somebody who's qualified but unassigned to a platform. And if none of that works, we're going to submit that reclamation, right, that reclama. And that reclama is going to go up to BUMED, and then BUMED will try to man it with somebody from another Navy Medicine Echelon 3, okay? So if we were working in Navy Medicine West before, now it's going to get kicked over to Navy Medicine East. All right, equipping. Right, so individual augmentation, platform augmentation, and Marine Forces augmentations. We got different equipping policies. So individual augmentation, personnel with orders to report to the Navy Expeditionary Combat Readiness Center / Navy Mobilization Processing Sites. They're going to receive mission-specific uniforms and ancillary uniform items, as well as organizational clothing and individual equipment and rapid field initiative survivability gear at the Naval individual augmentee combat training. So you're going to get all your equipment, all your uniforms and stuff at the Navy individual augmentee combat training center site, or at the U.S. Army training installation site if you're getting augmented with the Army. Okay, so your mission essential stuff, you're going to get it at your training site. For platform augmentation, right, your organizational clothing and individual equipment, that's going to be funded by the requesting command, right, or by the combatant commander. Uniforms other than your NWUs for EMF, right, and for deployed preventative medicine units will be funded by the sourcing command. So if you're assigned to a expeditionary medical facility or for deployed preventative medicine unit, and you need something other, because you got to buy your own NWUs, right? But if you need anything outside of those NWUs, the sourcing command is going to be the one who funds it. All right, and then for Marine Corps Forces augmentation, right, your organizational clothing and individual equipment will be issued by the operational platform in support of the mission. You should get what's called a special initial utility uniform allowance. Okay, so your special initial utility uniform allowance, right, that's authorized, right, for people. You only get one entitlement, and for any one period of continuous assignment, and there's got to be a 3-year break. Okay, so if you kind of been bouncing back and forth between Marine units, if you want this special initial utility uniform allowance, you've got to have a 3-year break before you can get it again. If you just do back to back to back, right, you don't get that allowance for each set of orders. There's got to be a 3-year break. Otherwise, they say you're good. All right, a little review here. All right, who must validate all augmentee requests prior to being received by BUMED? Who's going to validate all augmentee requests prior to going to being received by BUMED? Well, that's starting at the top, right? That's got to be validated by OpNav. Who tasks Navy Medicine Echelon 3 activities for the deployment execution of individual and platform augments? Okay, so who's going to task the Echelon 3s? Remember, the Echelon 3s are the regional commands, Navy Medicine West and Navy Medicine East, right? So the tasker is going to come from BUMED, and specifically it's going to come from BUMED M9, Operational Medicine and Capabilities Development. Within how many days should BUMED M9 task the Echelon 3 activities with augmentee request after receiving the validated request from OpNav? How many days does M9 have to send that request down to the Echelon 3 once they've received it from OpNav? They should get that done as soon as possible, but no later than 2 working days. How many years break in service with the Marine Corps must there be for a member to qualify for a special initial utility uniform allowance? There's got to be a 3-year break in service. What instruction did your Navy Medicine Augmentee program? Your Navy Medicine Augmentee program is BUMED Instruction 6440.5. What's the Navy Medicine's designated official readiness tracking and reporting system? Right, readiness tracking and reporting system is IMPARTS. What system does the Navy utilize as the authoritative system to meet the DoD's requirement to report readiness? That is your Defense Readiness Reporting System, Navy, your DRRS TAC-N. What forms your individual deployment readiness checklist? That's your NAVMED Form 6440/1. Within how many days of checking in must a member assigned to a platform complete their 6440/1? They've got 30 days to get that done. If a member has changes that affect their deployment readiness, how quickly must they notify the POMI? They got to let the POMI know within 48 hours. How quickly must the POMI update the member status in IMPARTS? If there's a change in the readiness, they got to get that done within 2 days. If a member has a condition that will make them non-deployable for blank days, they will no longer be assigned to a platform. If you've got a condition that's going to make you non-deployable for 90 days, you can no longer be assigned to a platform. What's the Navy's designated official manpower data system? Right, our manpower data system is going to be TIFMS and Demers I, right? The Total Force Manpower Management System and Demers I. What is the precedence in which platforms are augmented? All right, platforms are going to be augmented. First, our Marine forces are going to be augmented. Then our casualty receiving ships, our hospital ships next, our EMF, our forward deployed preventative medicine units, our OCONUS MTFs, and then finally our blood processing units. Temporary additional duty greater than how many days for personnel assigned to platforms requires notification to Navy Medicine Echelon 3 activities. Right? If you're going on temporary additional duty greater than 30 days, right? We gotta let the Echelon 3 know. Also, if you're going on temporary additional duty overseas, we gotta let them know, right? If platform assigned personnel are going temporary additional duty for greater than 30 days, or if they're going overseas, when must Navy Medicine Echelon 3 activities be notified? We gotta let them know 30 days prior to you going on that temporary additional duty. All right, that concludes this presentation on BUMED Instruction 6440.5 Delta, Navy Medicine's Augmentation Program. As always, I hope this is helping, and keep studying.